We've all had the experience of finding peace in the meditation, only to find it fall away. One of the lessons in impermanence and inconstancy. But it turns out that there are 4 attainments that make a permanent change. 4 attainments that make a permanent change in the mind. And today we're going to talk about the first of them, which is called stream entry. These are the noble attainments. Stream entry is explained in 2 images. One is the image of entering a stream, the image being that once you've entered the stream, then you will inevitably go all the way to Nibbana within 7 lifetimes. In the same way that once you fall into a river, the river current will take you along, take you out to the ocean. The other image is called the arising of the Dhamma eye, when you actually see something you've never seen before, which makes a permanent change in the mind. We'll be discussing both of these images today, the stream image in the morning and the Dhamma eye image in the afternoon. This experience, one, is immediately blissful. It's a direct knowledge of Nibbana, or unbinding, and the deathless. And it has a radical long-term impact on you. First, it changes your relationship to the Dhamma. You've seen the Dhamma. You're said to be consummate in view about the Four Noble Truths. You've seen that the Four Noble Truths really are true. They're not just an assumption. The Buddha gives the image of a well. That if you've seen that you look down in the well, you see that there is water in the well. You haven't plunged down into the well yet, but you know there's water there. In the same way, you've seen the Dhamma, you've seen the deathless, but you haven't fully taken a plunge. But however, now that you have seen it, your knowledge of the Dhamma is independent of others. If you're cut off from all their contact, you could still manage your own path. It takes a lot longer without help, but you can do it. Secondly, it makes a change in your behavior, where you're said to be consummate in virtue. You hold to the 5 precepts. Your virtues are said to be pleasing to the noble ones. Pleasing in the sense, on the one hand, they're said to be untorn or unspotted. I've always liked the concept of spotted virtue. Untorn and unspotted. In other words, you hold to the 5 precepts, you would not intentionally break them. But at the same time, you hold to them in a way that is conducive to concentration. In other words, you're not obsessive about them. You stick to them strictly, but you don't worry constantly about minor issues, because you know your intentions much more clearly now that you've seen the Dhamma. And you realize that the virtue is a matter of the intentions. At the same time, even though your precepts are untorn, they're not grasped at. In other words, you don't try to make a sense of your identity around them. In other words, you follow them because you see they're actually need to be followed, but you don't have to hold yourself up as being superior to other people because you do follow them. And finally, this experience changes your future course of samsara. It cuts 3 of what is said to be the 10 fetters that bind you to the process of samsara. Samsara, by the way, is not a place, it's an activity. It's something that we do. We just keep wandering on, creating new worlds, inhabiting them, and they fall apart, and we have to create new ones and keep doing this over and over again. And you'll be doing this only for no more than 7 more lifetimes. In the meantime, you've cut 3 of the fetters. Doubt about the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, the doubt, grasping at precepts and practices, and also holding to self-identity views. As I said, you have no more than 7 lifetimes remaining, and they will all be at least at the human level or higher. The Buddha gave an image one time. He took a little dirt under his fingernail, and he asked the monks, which is greater, the dirt under my fingernail or the dirt in the entire earth? The monks said the equivalent of the earth and the dirt in the entire earth. And he said, in the same way, the amount of suffering left for a stream enter is equal to the amount of dirt left under his fingernail. For those who haven't attained the stream, it's like the entire earth, the dirt in the entire earth. So it's a good experience to have. So today we'll talk about stream entry. The discussion this morning will be what you need to do in order to give rise to this experience, and we'll focus on the image, as I said, of entering the stream. This afternoon we'll talk about what the experience actually is as it's described. The image of the image of gaining the Dharma eye, what you see with the Dharma eye, and why it has an impact on you and what that impact is. So in terms of the prerequisites, it's a pretty basic list. The Buddha says you need 4 things. 1 is association with people of integrity. 2, you listen to the true Dharma from them. 3, you pay appropriate attention, which is basically learning to see things in terms of your actions as being skillful or unskillful, or or how they fall in line with the Four Noble Truths. Which of your actions are the craving that gives rise to suffering? Which of your actions are the clinging that is the suffering? What you can do to put end to it, and the path that you have to follow. So that's appropriate attention, seeing things within that framework. And then finally, practice of the Dhamma in accordance with the Dhamma. We'll explain what these mean shortly. Now, you listen to these, and there's nothing really esoteric about them. Sometimes we're told that because three fetters are cut for stream entry, we think we have to cut the 3 fetters first, and then attain the stream. And we have to require some special secret knowledge that's not told elsewhere to how to cut the fetters. Actually, it's this experience of Nibbana itself that cuts the fetters. All you have to do is follow the path to Nibbana, and when that, I have to do. But it's all laid out. And as the Buddha said, he wasn't one of these closed-fisted teachers who would, save special esoteric teachings to the end and then suddenly show them to you. He laid it all out from the very beginning. It's simply a matter of following the path, and it all comes together at some point. He does give the image that you can never anticipate when it's going to come together. It's kind of like going to the Grand Canyon. If you're going to a mountain, you can see the mountain ahead of you. You know how close you are. If you're going to the Grand Canyon, you don't see it. You can be just a half a mile away, and you don't know anything is there. But when the moment happens, when everything does come together, then it has a radical change. So these 4 steps, association with people, integrity, listening to the true Dhamma, appropriate attention, and practice in Dhamma in accordance with the Dhamma, correspond to what the Buddha said are 3 types of discernment. The first 2 factors, association with people of integrity or listening to the Dhamma, corresponds to the Dhamma that you learn through listening, or the understanding, wisdom you learn through listening. Appropriate attention is the discernment you gain through thinking things through. And practice the Dhamma in accordance with the Dhamma is the discernment that comes from the actual practice of developing the qualities that Buddha talked about in his description of the Eightfold Path. So let's go down these 4 categories. First, people of integrity. The Buddha said there are 4 qualities that they will exemplify. 1 is conviction in the Buddha's awakening. 2, virtue in their behavior. 3, generosity. And 4, discernment. The discernment there is said to be discernment, penetrative discernment into arising and passing away, which may seem like you're just watching things coming and going, but the word penetrative there means that you understand the causes for these things, why they arise, why they pass away. You also understand which things are skillful when they arise, which things are not, and what you should do with them. So it's not just passively watching them coming and going, but you have a more penetrative knowledge into why they come, how they go. So you're looking for someone who's got conviction, virtue, generosity, and discernment. You also want someone who is truthful and compassionate. In other words, they really know the Dhamma, and they are truthful in their reports about the Dhamma, and they have the compassion to want to teach you the way. And the Buddha gives you a test. This is found in Majjhima 95. You hang around a teacher, and you're not going to know a teacher by looking at their bio online and how much they smile in their pictures. You have to spend time with that person. And you have to be very observant to see that person's virtue, person's purity, endurance, and discernment. But the test for truthfulness and compassion is, in terms of compassion, would that person ever tell someone to do something that was not in that person's best interest? And if the answer is yes, go someplace else. Secondly, would that person claim to know something that he or she doesn't know? And again, the answer is yes, go someplace else. As for discernment, does this person have knowledge that is deep, subtle, penetrative? And here, if the answer is yes, this is someone you want to take as a teacher. But the person has to pass all 3 tests. All too often, you get cases where people have a lot of eloquence in explaining things, but they're not truthful and they're not compassionate, and you want to stay away from people like that. Now, to see whether someone has integrity, you have to have some integrity too. As the Buddha says, if you don't have any integrity, you tend to see lack of integrity everywhere you look. You assume that everybody else has the same qualities that you do. So you have to see what it is in yourself that gives rise to integrity. The qualities, again, of truthfulness, compassion, and knowledge. So that's how you look for a person of integrity. Then the second question is, what is the true Dhamma? The Buddha gives many tests for discerning what is the true Dhamma. One is the test that he gave to the Kalamas. If a particular teaching says you to do something and it's going to cause harm for yourself or for other people or for both, that's not true Dhamma. And whichever qualities of mind that would give rise to, say, killing, stealing, illicit sex, lying, taking intoxicants, okay, that would not be true Dhamma. He also gave a test for his stepmother, and when she asked for a short Dhamma teaching. He gave her basically a list of 8 things that the Dhamma teaches. One, if the Dhamma, when put into practice, leads to dispassion rather than to passion. Secondly, if it leads to being fettered rather than, if it leads to being unfettered rather than fettered. In other words, you are looking for something that liberates you from your defilements. Third quality you're looking for is what they call shedding rather than accumulating. And the word shedding here basically means shedding your pride and shedding your thoughts of revenge. One of the best stories in the canon, the one that I think would make a great movie, is the story of a king and a queen whose kingdom has been overrun by another king. They hide out, they dress themselves as wanderers, and they run away. And they actually go into the capital of the other king. And there, the queen gives birth to a child. And as the child begins to get a little bit older and begins to know what's going on, they realize he is not in a place of safety. They could be caught at any time, and if they get killed, he's going to get killed too. So they send him out into the villages with some relatives, and have him go. And he comes in every now and then. And it happens that as he's getting older, he comes in one day and finds his parents have been caught. They're being paraded around the city. Their heads have been shaved off, their arms tied behind them, and they're going to be taken out to be executed. And as they're coming past, the father sees the son. And the father says, don't look too close, don't look too far away, because animosity is never ended through animosity, it's ended through non-animosity. And people say, who is he talking to? What is he saying? And the young prince knows. And so the parents get taken out to the south side of town. It's always struck me as interesting that the south side of town is where they did the executions. Anyway, they get taken out there, they get executed, drawn and quartered. And then they set up guards over the body pieces. And so the young prince finds some alcohol and gives it to the guards. They fall asleep, and then he cremates his parents' body parts. The king, who had them killed, is up in his terrace of his palace. And he sees this fire, and he says, oh, there's somebody who is loyal to these people. I'm in danger. But he doesn't know who. So the young prince, Bhikkhu is his name, goes off into the forest and grieves for a while. And then he comes back and he's going to get revenge. So he gets himself hired in the elephant stables of the palace. And he plays the lute for the elephants. That's another detail I like in this story. And the elephants get to hear nice music. It's like when I was a teenager, I worked in a record store. And there was this farmer who would come in once a month. And he would buy a whole pile of records. Now, I was saving up my wages so I could buy records. But he was buying a whole pile of Mozart and Bach and all these other good composers to play for his cows. And then after a month, this was back in the days of long playing records, after the month they'd be all scratchy and worn out, so we'd come in and get another batch. So back in the old days, they would play the lute for the elephants. And so the young prince is playing the lute, and he plays it very well. And the king hears it, so he has him called into his private quarters and play the lute for me. And so the prince does his best, and then the king says, okay, you stay here. You're part of my entourage now. And so the young prince does his best to be a loyal servant to the king, to be trusted. He gets up in the morning before the king does. He goes to bed in the evening after the king goes to bed. Does everything the king asks for. And the king trusts him more and more and more. And finally, there's a long, detailed story about how he finally gets the king in a spot where he's sitting on the ground out in the forest. The king is lying there with his head on his lap, trying to get some rest. He says, now's my chance. So he pulls out his sword. Then he remembers what his father said. So he puts the sword back. Then he starts thinking, this king has done a lot of mischief to me and my family. Pulls out his sword again. 3 times. And then finally, after he's put the sword back the 3rd time, the king wakes up in a fright. He says, I just had this horrible dream that this Prince Bhikkhu was after me. And the prince takes his hair and pulls out the sword and says, do you know who I am? And so the king pleads for his life. And Bhikkhu says, no, I plead you for my life. And so they swear they're not going to do any harm to each other. The Buddha told this story to a group of monks who had gotten into an argument. The monastery was about to fall apart because one monk had not flushed the toilet. And he's telling the monks, look, if warriors who live by the sword can show this amount of forgiveness for one another, why can't you? So this is one of the qualities that the Buddha teaches, which he calls shedding. In other words, you have any pride, you have any thoughts of revenge, you just let them go. Another quality that you gain you can use to recognize the true Dhamma is if it makes you modest. If you're showing off your knowledge of the Dhamma or practicing the Dhamma to show up, it's not true Dhamma. Here the story in the canon is of this young novice he's a novice of Anuruddha, who's the monk who's supposed to have what they call the divine eye, who has this power where he can sneak off and then levitate up to the Himalayan mountains, wash his teacher's bowl in the waters of that lake that's right at Mount Kailash, and then come back. And his main thought is, don't let anybody see me. So that's the kind of quality you want. Even if you have psychic powers, you don't show them off. Fourth quality is contentment, and this means contentment with physical things, material things, contentment with your food, clothing, shelter, medicine. As long as it's good enough to practice, it's good enough. You don't have to fight for anything more than that. This does not mean contentment with your state of mind. This is an important point. Buddha says the secret to his awakening was that he wasn't even content with his skillful qualities, much less his unskillful ones, until they'd reached full awakening. So you're content with material things, so you can focus your discontent on what can I do to clean up my mind. Another quality is it leads to seclusion rather than to entanglement with other people. Here this is defined as there's a monk who's practicing, and people come to him with questions about the Dharma, and he answers this question just enough to make them want to go away. In other words, you don't string people along and chat them up. Another quality is persistence, that you really do try hard to eradicate unskillful qualities in your mind and develop skillful ones. And the final quality is unburdensomeness, is you try to place as little burden on other people as possible. And here the story that illustrates this quality is there's a monk one time who was bothered. He was meditating in the forest, and it was an ideal place to meditate, with one exception. There was a marsh nearby, and the birds would come in at night and sing in the marsh all night long, keep disturbing his concentration. And so the Buddha said, do you want to make them go away? Ask for a feather from each of them. So the monk gets up in the middle of the night, in the middle of midnight, he says, for each of you birds out there, I want a feather from each of you. And the birds say, this is a greedy monk, and they go away. So those are the 8 qualities you look for as a test for true Dharma that leads to dispassion, being unfettered, shedding, modesty, contentment, seclusion, persistence, and being unburdensome. You notice some of these qualities have to do with the attainment of the goal, i.e. that there's dispassion and being unfettered. Some of them have to do with your relationship to other people in terms of being modest and being unburdensome. And then your own internal qualities you're developing, which would be shedding, contentment, seclusion, and persistence. Now, the Buddha would teach people the way to stream entry. There's many descriptions in the canon of taking some people, some of whom seem pretty unpromising, but he would see that they had the potential, and he would give what's called a graduated discourse, and this is one of the principles of the true Dhamma. It starts out by talking about the virtues of generosity, what a good thing it is to be generous, and how meaningful it is. There were people back in the time of the Buddha who said generosity had no meaning at all. Everything is determined by physical causes. If one person gives X something, X gives something to Y, it's not because X had any good virtue at all, it's simply because X had to do that because of his behavior is totally determined, or her behavior. And the Buddha said, no, and we have choices. We have the power of choice in our lives to choose to be virtuous and not, or generous and not. And so it does have meaning. The same with virtue. There is something good about making the choice that I'm not going to harm. It really means something in the development of your mind. After having talked about generosity and virtue, then he would talk about the rewards of those, not only here in this lifetime, but also in heaven after death. And then it gets you thinking about all the pleasures you might want to have as a deva. But then he says, but there are drawbacks. Even heavenly sensual pleasures are going to end, and they degrade the mind. You gotta think about it. Suppose, for about an aeon or so, you had everything you wanted, and then you had to fall down, come back to earth. it'd be a pretty hard fall. My teacher had a couple of students who were really difficult people to please. He said, they were devas last time around. And it's like samsara is a bad joke. You work so hard to get up there, and then when you get up to heaven, it destroys all your good qualities, and you come back down again. So you think about that, and you realize it would be good just to get out of this repeated cycle. So after talking about the drawbacks and degradation of sensuality, he would have you look favorably on renunciation. Now, renunciation doesn't mean just giving things up, but it means looking for pleasure in places outside of sensuality. The sensuality is your fascination with thinking about sensual thoughts. The pleasures themselves are not the problem. It's you're thinking about sensual pleasures. How much you would like this, how much you would like that. I mean, you could sit here for the whole morning and thinking about what am I going to have for lunch? Where am I going to go? That would be sensuality. So you try to find your pleasure elsewhere, i.e. in right concentration. So if you've been following along here, you look inside, and the Buddha would teach you basically how to get the mind to find happiness in concentration. And then he would teach you the Four Noble Truths. And for someone who'd been following along with that talk, there are many cases where they become stream enters. You have all kinds of peoples. You have lepers, you have kings, you have... There's one case of a lay follower who was quite wealthy, who was a follower of the Jains, and the Buddha has managed to convert him, and then he becomes a stream enter. The most unexpected ones are the ones where Devadatta has sent some assassins to kill the Buddha. There's one archer has been sent to kill the Buddha, and then he tells the archer, once you've killed the Buddha, go down this road. He has two archers waiting at that other road. He says, okay, when this first archer comes by, kill him, and then go down this other road, and then when those go down the other one, there are four archers waiting for them. And they're supposed to do their dirty deed and then go down, and then there are 8 archers waiting for them. So you can imagine that's quite a chain of command. And the first one comes in, and he sees the Buddha, and he's just frozen with fear. And the Buddha says, put down your arms, and I'll teach you the Dhamma. So he puts them down. And here's this guy, not a hired gun, but a hired archer. And the Buddha manages to take him to stream entry. And then he says, don't go down that road, okay? There's another road. So he goes down the other road. The 2 archers waiting for him, see he's not coming, so they come out. And the Buddha teaches them. And so on with the 4 and the 8. So the Buddha was able to take people who didn't have much of a background at all, but if they were sincere in following the Dhamma, as he was describing it, they could attain stream entry. I noticed when I was in Thailand, the forest tradition attracts sometimes people who have been on the wrong side of the law. But they meet a forest Jhana and they say, okay, this is finally somebody I can trust. And when you have somebody like that giving you trust, it's 100%. So that's probably what happened in the case of those archers. So let's listen to the true Dhamma, how you recognize the true Dhamma. And then we'll talk a little bit more about what it means, how you listen to the true Dhamma. And part of that is applying appropriate attention. The Buddha says you start out by listening to the Dhamma with respect for the person giving the teaching, respect for the Dhamma itself, and then respect for yourself. That what the Buddha is talking about, what this teacher is talking about, is something that I can do, something that I can learn from. And so you take it in, and then you apply appropriate attention, which, as I said, is looking at things in terms of the Buddha's 2 categorical teachings. In other words, the teachings that are true across the board. First one is the teaching on unskillful qualities should be abandoned, skillful qualities should be developed. That's true across the board. And then the second one, of course, is the Four Noble Truths and their duties. Suffering or stress should be comprehended, its cause should be abandoned, the cessations should be realized, and you do that by developing the path. So you apply questions that come from those frameworks to whatever you're doing. It's primarily an issue of asking the right questions. In terms of the hindrances, the question is, how do I abandon them because they're cause for suffering? For the factors of awakening, the question is, how do I develop them? And for the 5 clinging aggregates, the questions are, how do I comprehend them? And talking about the clinging aggregates, it doesn't mean that the aggregates cling, but these aggregates have been clung to. And it's interesting, we talk about the cause of suffering and the cessation of and suffering itself, and with two separate duties, and it sounds like they're two totally separate things. They're not that separate. And there's a passage where the Buddha defines the craving that causes suffering as desire and passion. Another one where he calls clinging desire and passion. So the question is, what is the difference between the two? And the difference comes down to the images that they use in the words for craving and clinging. The word for craving, tanha, can also mean thirst or hunger. The word for clinging is to feed. So in other words, you're hungry for something. The fact that you're hungry is what leads you to try to look for something that you feed on. Once you've found something to feed on, you're holding on to it, but you're still not satisfied. And the fact that you're still feeding all the time means that you haven't reached satisfaction. So we had to go through this process of looking for things to feed on, feeding on them. They don't give satisfaction, so we look for more, we look for more, we look for more. And it's just this cycle that the Buddha's trying to get us out of. So as I said, it's a matter of asking the right questions. The Buddha has a passage in one of the suttas where he says, there are a lot of wrong questions you can ask. Who am I? Do I have a self? Do I not have a self? Those things, he says. What was I in the past? What am I going to in the future? What am I now? Do I exist? Do I not exist? The Buddha says, those just get you more and more entangled. The right questions are, okay, what's the craving? What's the suffering here? What am I doing that's causing the suffering? How can I stop? Those are the appropriate questions that you ask. So when you're listening to a Dhamma, you ask yourself, how does this apply to my life in the way that I make myself suffer? And what lessons can I learn? That's how you learn, that's how you apply appropriate attention, whether you're listening to the Dhamma or you're actually dealing with qualities coming up in your mind. And finally, practicing the Dhamma in accordance with the Dhamma means two things. One, you don't change the Dhamma to suit your preferences. There's that teaching from the third patriarch in Chan that the Great Way is not difficult for those with no preferences. It doesn't mean you don't prefer the end of suffering over suffering. You do prefer the end of suffering. But whatever is required in the path, you're willing to do it. You don't let your preferences get in the way. And when the Buddha defines a practice in accordance with the Dhamma and the canon, basically you're practicing for the sake of disenchantment, dispassion, cessation, unbinding, or nibbana. Now, dispassion sounds like oatmeal without sugar or salt. So I'm working on a book right now that's trying to make the idea of dispassion actually attractive. But you can look at it as basically growing up. You've been playing games like a child, and you realize you're just playing games and it's not getting you anywhere, it's no longer worth it. Now, there are two kinds of games that you can decide I've outgrown. One is tic-tac-toe. There are only so many ways you can play tic-tac-toe, right? And once you've realized, okay, if you put your first X in any of those sidebars, you're going to lose. But if you start out with the X someplace else, you always have a chance of at least coming to a draw or winning. And it's no longer fun anymore. Once you've seen through all these are all the possibilities, it's no longer any fun. So that's one of the ways that you gain dispassion. You've totally comprehended it. The other is chess. You know that you're not going to come to the end of all the different ways you can play chess, but you realize, I'm not learning anything out of this that's really useful. I'm learning strategic thinking, but it's strategic thinking within a certain set of very artificial rules, which cannot be applied outside. And you say, this is not worth my time. So you basically outgrow things that are no longer worth doing. That's what dispassion means. Now, as I said, these are the four qualities that would lead you to an experience of the stream. The stream itself is said to be the Noble Eightfold Path, everything from right view to right concentration. And when these factors all come together, that's when you have an experience of awakening, which would be described either as unbinding or it's described as the deathless. Now, when we talk about the factors of the path, the question comes up: is jhana necessary for this attainment? And you see, after all, there are cases where some people are listening to a Dhamma talk, it brings about the experience of stream entry. And when some of these people have little or no background in meditation, the answer here, comes to right concentration is part of the stream, so it's got to be in there someplace. Two, the related question, well, what is jhana? Sometimes we hear that you get the mind into jhana, you can't hear anything, you can't think. Obviously, you're not going to be listening to a Dhamma talk and getting jhana, much less stream entry. But the question is, there's this term citta segakata, which means singleness of mind, which is a definition of concentration. And so, some people say this. They translate this term as one-pointedness. In other words, your mind gets so focused on one point that you can't sense anything else. However, the word aga in the jittas, egagata, ega means one, aga means either means tip or the top of something, or it means a meeting place. And I think in this particular case, it's the meeting place image is what's relevant. Because the Buddha always talks about entering and remaining in jhana as if it's a room or a place you can get into and stay. And his descriptions throughout the canon of these states are of full body awareness. And as for your ears going deaf, sometimes when you're into the formless states that would happen, but when you're in any of the four jhanas, you can still hear things. So you're in a position where you can listen to the Dhamma talk, you can apply the lessons to getting the mind into concentration, and then applying appropriate attention to the concentration itself to see how it is fabricated, like everything else. And then the mind gets more and more inclined to want to go for what is unfabricated. When we talked earlier about those factors for how to listen to the Dhamma, as I said, have respect for the teacher, or you don't despise the teacher. You don't despise the Dhamma, you don't despise yourself. And then you have appropriate attention, and your mind is single. And here's the word egaga comes in again. So it shows that if your mind is in that state, you got to be able to hear. Otherwise, you wouldn't be hearing the Dhamma. So it is possible to listen to the Dhamma, apply it, and then get the mind into jhana as part of the coming together of the Eightfold Path. At other times when you're meditating on your own, it's the same sort of process. When you get the mind into right concentration, and you get really attached to the concentration. This is an important thing. I don't know how many people say, well, you watch out for concentration, you're going to get attached, and you're never going to get out. And being attached to concentration is much better than being attached to breaking the precepts, okay? I don't know anybody who's ever killed, stealed. Even in the Jhana wars, they don't kill people over Jhana. So it's a good attachment. And then you learn how to pry yourself away from that attachment by pulling out a little bit. The image the Buddha gives is of a person sitting watching someone who's lying down, or a person standing watching someone who's sitting. You pull back a little bit, you see that this state too, even though it seems very peaceful, very calm, is still fabricated. And the mind inclines to the unfabricated. Just put down all attachments. And that's when the experience of the rising of the stream. And the stream will then take you to the deathless. So those are the four qualities, or the four activities the Buddha said will lead to stream entry. You associate with people of integrity. You listen to the true Dhamma. You apply appropriate attention, and then you practice the Dhamma in accordance with the Dhamma. If all these things come together, that would be the point where the mind reaches a point. In terms of an analogy the Buddha gave, it's like the time when he was asked by Deva, how did you cross the stream? And the Buddha says, I crossed the stream by neither pushing forward nor by staying in place. And the Deva said, oh, the first time I've ever seen that. And it's a paradox. I mean, in space and time, you can either move or stay. And the Buddha is basically saying there's an alternative to moving and staying. And when you take the alternative, that's when you get out of space and time. And that's when you encounter the deathless. So those are the factors that lead to stream entry. Any questions?
Who's a question? Just pass the mic. No, Alex.
Oh, me.
You can talk. Give me a question.
And then pass it. Okay.
That's Alan.
Is appropriate attention the same as penetrative insight into arising and passing away?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Appropriate attention is asking the questions about what am I doing, and is it skillful or not? Is it something I should continue doing or something I should stop? Penetrative insight means seeing one factor in the mind or something arises in the mind, you know why it came, and you have to value your judgment, this is not worth following, or not worth following through.
That makes sense. So, but they're both active.
They're both active and they're related to each other.
Okay. And how do you know if you're utilizing, like, is there a good check for if you're utilizing appropriate attention? Or
You ask yourself, there's a problem in my life. Am I looking at my contribution to this problem, or looking at somebody else's? That's a good start.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? So, Tanajan, I have a question regarding.
Oh. My volume or his? This mic, okay. How about this? How about this? No. Up, 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 up. It's getting look kind of resonant. Okay. Can you hear me? More? I have a low voice. It just kind of disappears into the carpet.
Speaker on in the community hall?
It's very loud right here at the speaker.
Okay. Okay, then you can turn it down a little bit because you're okay.
So, I have a question regarding, from your experience, people in Southeast Asia compared to the Westerners. Who, from your experience, are there people like either monk or lay people are more conducive to becoming stream enterers?
I haven't done a census. But, I mean, the only lay stream enters I know are in Asia. But it's, Asia's getting as crazy as the West.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you can elaborate just a little bit of the relationship of stream entry and jhana and samadhi.
Okay, basically, jhana and samadhi are fabricated states of mind. They're put together. They're composed of the 5 aggregates. For instance, if you're focusing on the breath would be form. The feeling of pleasure that comes would be vedana. The perception you have, the mental image you have of where the breath comes in, where it runs out, how it runs in the body, where you are in relationship to the breath. That's perception. Your thoughts about how to, your intention to stay with the one object would be sankhara, or fabrication. And also especially when you're settling in and you're talking to yourself about how to get the mind and the breath to fit together, that's all intention, fabrication. And then finally, consciousness is the awareness of these processes. And so what you've got is something fabricated, you put it together. And again, you want to get more and more inclined to wanting to stay in that state as much as you can, so that you cut off a lot of your attachments to other things. It's like painting yourself into a corner, and you can't go back, and you've got walls. And basically break through the wall.
Any other questions?
There's a hand over here. What's the hand over there? Okay. There's one hand over here, too.
My question is, maybe I'll use some terms which are not very Dhamma specific.
Is
I don't think the mic is on.
You gotta use like a and then speak
like
Hi.
this way.
Hello. Okay. Sweet. My question is, let's say someone starts as like a run-of-the-mill person and they want to attain stream entry. And so, I listened to the talk. It sounds like there are a lot of steps involved. And so, my question is, how does, when we live the world, we check ourselves how we are progressing along the path. So are there simple tests we can like monthly or yearly do on ourselves? Like, okay, like one thing I can think of, am I suffering less than I was last year? And that's a test that I can think of. Are there any other things like Buddha suggests that we can constantly keep track of so we know that we are progressing and not regressing or plateauing along the path?
Okay, well, sometimes you have to live with the plateau for a while. But basically the question is, you don't want to be backtracking. And the question has to do with your precepts, has to do with your state of mind. Do you find it easier and easier not to get angry in situations that used to get you angry? Easier not to be greedy about things you used to be greedy for? That's a step in the right direction. But as for how close you are to stream entry, as I said, it's like going to the Grand Canyon. You can't see it, you don't know until it hits. But you can judge, okay, when I'm doing this, because look at the Buddha's own practice. He would ask himself, I'm doing this, am I getting the results I want? And then if I'm not, okay, what could I do instead? But as for the plateauing, sometimes it's like moving into a new area. You have to learn how to settle in before you can be ready to go further up. And sometimes the plateau will last for a while, and you have to learn how to live with that and keep encouraging yourself. There's a question over here.
If it's green, it's on? Okay. You said that the only stream enters you know are in Asia. How do you know if someone is a stream enter?
I've heard about their practice, how they'd explain their practice. Now, there may be stream enters here, I don't know, but I haven't talked to too many people about it. I gave this course a couple weeks back, and there was one woman who was a certified stream enter. She was very difficult. Difficult.
Certified in which way? What do you mean by that?
She'd been told by some teacher that she was. One more.
I'm afraid to ask this, but do you think of yourself as a certified stream enter?
Monks can't answer that question.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough.
A little bit of Zoom land.
Okay, I'll first try to prioritize the questions that are related to the topic. And I'll try to see if I can mention the names of the people who asked these questions.
No,
you don't need to?
Give the names,
Okay.
just the question.
All right, so just go to the question. How realistic is stream entry for lay people?
I mean, it can happen.
Okay. Any other comments?
Can happen.
All right. How to discern if the teacher has deep knowledge when our own knowledge is half-baked? This is related to the question where you had, to the 3 tests that you gave.
As long as their knowledge is more sophisticated than yours, you listen to them for a while.
Okay. I hope that answered the question. There's one question that's related to people of integrity. And this is a difficult question. I'm trying to rephrase it because the question is not very clear. And after clarifications, this is what I understand. It seems like this person is implying that even people with integrity, they get to that spot because other people have to engage in wars and other things in order to allow them the space required to have integrity, to avoid evil actions, I guess. And so the question I think that she is asking is, if I cannot afford them, which makes me question its foundation, the foundation of integrity, it is very precarious if it is associated with money. It is all on us if we can find. Is it all on us if we can find safe spaces virtually?
Ooh, I mean, if you have to pay money to find a person of integrity, that raises a big question mark right there.
Okay. There is one more question related to the the stream entry, how would one who has entered the stream judge their own sila, perfect intention around the precepts?
Okay, when you've entered the stream, you've learned a lot of things about the mind, and you're a better judge of your intentions as a result. Now the question always is, to be honest with yourself, you have to say, it may not have happened, and so I've got to keep watch over my mind. I mean, your doubt about the Buddha's ended, but you can be in a position where you have no doubts, but still you don't know. There was once a monk who came to a Ajahn Mahaprabhu's monastery, and in Ajahn Mahaprabhu's monastery, the code term for being a stream enter is that you have no doubts about the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. So this monk didn't know the code. And so they asked him, do you have any doubts about the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha? He said, oh, no, I have no doubts at all. So they went and reported that to Ajahn Mahaprabhu, and Ajahn Mahaprabhu said, yes, I have no doubts about what I see, can't see. So there is that possibility. So you have to keep checking.
Actually, it turns out there is a couple more. If a lay disciple enters the stream and then trains as a Theravada Bhikkhu, how skillfully would he follow the monastic code?
Okay, the Buddha says that it's possible for even arahants to break some of the minor rules. I mean, they try not to, but it can happen. And when they do, they undergo whatever penalty there is. But the precepts that are basic to basic to the holy life, which are the 5 precepts, they would not break intentionally.
All right. Unrelated top questions. Do we have time for that, or do we have to go ahead?
I have one more question here.
We got questions in here.
Yes. So, can just as we like lay people have a lot of responsibility every day, and instead, if we just not just but like add on of practice through daily routine of life, like instead of like sitting and do samadhi, right? But maybe like we all know, like sometimes driving or cleaning dishes or all this. Throughout the day, when I doing things, I'm conscious of what I'm doing, but sometimes I know that, oh no, I'm not being conscious, I'm losing my mind at that time. So that kind of practice, then sometimes I do like have in the morning, try to give time for like 15 or 20 minutes. Now actually listening to your teaching on meditation kind of brought me back to go back to do my daily in the morning, maybe 3 or 4 times a day. Doing this can consider as practicing and maybe pursuing the stream entry. And on top of it, that only 5 precepts can help you into the stream entry or has to be the 8th precept.
Well, the 5 precepts are plenty. And there are a lot of cases where they were lay people observing the 5 precepts in the canon attain the stream. It requires a certain amount of dedication, that you really are dedicated to training your mind, observing your mind as much as you can. And as John Fung said, if you're crazy about the meditation, then it's going to go well. In other words, you have a few free minutes, okay, you concentrate. Or if you can't sort of close your eyes and concentrate the mind, then you're trying to be as mindful as possible as what you're doing, and catching the mind when it's going in unskillful directions. And it's this ability to be committed to the practice, and also to reflecting on what you're doing, and seeing that, okay, where you're going off the path, you correct yourself. That's how you nourish the Dhamma.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question to your last comment. Whenever I get, quote, crazy about the meditation, I have this tendency to get really serious. And it seems like I lose my sense of humor and eventually get, honestly, somewhat depressed.
Well, no, that's not being crazy, that's being stupid. The Dharma is not supposed to get you crazy and depressed and everything. You're supposed to find some joy in the practice. One. And two, one thing I notice about all the different ajahns that I lived with, the ones who were really, really good had a really good sense of humor. Because one of the things you're going to need is to be able to laugh at your defilements. So, if you find yourself getting grim, say, "Well, I need to gladden my mind," and so find some way that's within the boundaries of the practice that you can gladden your mind.
Would you have any suggestions on topics?
Traditionally, you can think about the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. What a great thing it is that we still have their teachings and we can still practice. And as I said, if you learn how to laugh at your defilements, that's always good. I don't know if I mentioned it. I've probably mentioned it here a couple of times. There's in the Vinaya, which is the disciplinary rules of the canon. They have an origin story for a lot of the rules, and a lot of them are funny. I mean, they really are, and there's a reason for that. One, it helps you to disidentify with the behavior that you're seeing. That really was stupid, you know. And then secondly, you see that the people who set out the rules had a sense of humor, so it's not grim and oppressive. So learn how to have your own, ability to laugh at your defilements.
Thanissaro, you spoke earlier about learning how to play chess and the fact that it's not necessarily practical or generalized to other things. So I'm thinking like.
Said that to provoke the chess players.
Yeah, I know I'm not a chess player, but I'm a scientist. There are likely many scientists and engineers in this area, in this room, and I was wondering like. How do you see the fact that someone kind of devotes a big chunk of their life to problem solving that is not immediately related to Dhamma, but it's maybe not harmful to other people and it's moral?
As long as it's not harmful, it's good. And the fact that you have some problem solving in real world issues, that's very different from chess. Chess is basically got very, very, very specific rules, and we have to play within the rules. And a lot of problem solving in the real world is you have to think outside the box. And that ability to think outside the box is going to be helpful for meditation.
I have... Oh, are you done?
That question follows the last one.
We're going to move this one.
Oh yeah, thank you. I wondered about the love, the idea of love in practice, and I listen to your talks online, and I don't hear you speak about that very much. And I guess I feel like in some ways there's a dryness about the teaching. That there's a part of me that's sort of like looking for a little bit more juiciness or something, or I don't know, something about love and emotion. And I wondered if you have any thoughts about that, or how you experience that, or is that something that you experience through the practice that you're...
The healthy part of love is the compassion and the empathy, right? And you can develop those two qualities.
And do you personally, through this practice, feel like a sense of that compassion and empathy?
Is, having been around some compassionate teachers and been the recipient of that compassion, which sometimes included being really harsh with me, but realizing that the harshness was part because they really were concerned about where I was unskillful.
Because I feel that for me, like sometimes I lose touch. Maybe it's also like what this other man is saying about, like kind of, like I don't feel like a sense of happiness if I'm doing kind of just a straight, like kind of concentration practice, where it doesn't feel like I don't know, like a love for humanity, or I'm like having this idea that it should feel different, and I'm wondering if I'm missing something, or is this just the practice?
There's both. Yes, you are missing something. Part of it is just having a community where you're working together on the path. But at the same time, sometimes you have to ask yourself, when I'm feeling lonely, which voices in the mind are telling me that I'm lonely? What am I convincing myself that I'm lacking, that I'm actually not lacking? There's the old Christian saying, count your blessings. I was reading a description one time of life on the prairie. This one woman was giving advice to her daughter who was going to move off and establish a house. And she talked about, this is how you wash your clothes. And it sounded like something you would just spend all afternoon doing, just washing clothes. You had to draw the water from the well, had to bring it in, had to put it over the fire, and all the work that was involved in that. And then you take the water and you let it cool down a little bit, and then you pour it on the flowers in front of the house. And then you sit on the porch and you count your blessings. So it's good to stop every now and then and say, okay, what reasons do I have for being happy that I'm on the path? In what ways? And remember, the path is not just meditation. Generosity is an important part. And start thinking about it. Wake up in the morning, tell yourself, how can I be generous today? Look for opportunities. And there's a certain satisfaction that comes with being generous that you don't get by just doing meditating all the time.
Thank you. Also, just a technical thing. I don't know if putting the mic closer to your mouth might help,
okay.
but I'm not a technical person.
Okay. Is this better? I tend to wear out after a while. Okay.
All right. Good morning. I have a question regarding associated with the people with integrity. How do I identify if a person has integrity? Because I feel like sometimes it's kind of associated with our own values, and each individual's got their own perceptions and maybe some tolerance capacities of their life. How, is there something that we have a standard, or is something truly based on personal feelings?
Well, part of it is the precepts. You want to look at someone who does not break the precepts. And the number one precept is the one about lying. And that's the one area where people can make so many excuses, like I'm lying out of compassion, and this person can't bear the truth, and that's a lie. So you look for someone who's really as truthful as possible, seems to be trying to be truthful about what they say all the time. And just look at how they interact with other people. Would they cause some other people to break the precepts?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, that's someone who hasn't had a question yet first.
Hi, how do you balance the inner spiritual work and the outer physical work?
Depends on how strong you are. I found that our physical work is actually useful every now and then to get you out of the sitting, walking routine. But you have to. It's going to depend on how strong you are, how much physical work you're going to do. The same with intellectual work. You have to figure out how much you are capable of doing before your brain just wears out. And when you have to stop and take a mental rest.
Thank you.
I used to be, I could work for 2 hours on the computer in the afternoon for writing. Can't do that anymore. Okay. And then we'll get people over here.
Yeah. Ajahn, my question is about chanting. As lay followers, we are never asked to learn chanting. That's something I discovered on a visit to Abhayagiri. Do you feel that's an important support? Because almost all monks chant. So, and then some thoughts how much we should chant, and do we need to memorize it?
Well, it's a good way of getting yourself out of the context of daily life as you were getting ready to sit down and meditate. And you start thinking about thoughts of goodwill for all beings, reflecting on aging, illness, and death, those kinds of chants that you find useful for reflection, or the chants about the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And it's basically to get you out of the context of my life in daily life, and remind you, there's a larger context. There's the context of this tradition that's been going on for 2,600 years. And you're thinking about all beings throughout the universe. And then you come into your meditation. So however much chanting you need to do in order to get the mind into that state, Some days it might be a long time. Other days you do a few minutes, okay, enough. I'm ready to sit down. So vary it according to what you feel your needs are. Because think about the Buddha on the night of his awakening. He started out with remembering his previous lifetimes. And if you think you're bringing stories into your meditation, he had aeons. But he didn't go straight to the insight that led to awakening. First, the question was, well, seeing that my lifetimes went up and down, why was that? And it was in the second knowledge, and when he took a much larger perspective, thinking about the universe as a whole, all beings dying and being reborn, that he saw that it was in line with their karma. From that larger perspective, he also noticed that their karma was not just, you did X bad in this lifetime, so you go to a bad place. Sometimes you do something bad, but at the moment of death, you acquire a right view that prevents you from going to a bad place, or vice versa. So he saw the power of the karma in the present moment. That was the insight that took him to his third knowledge. So again, stepping out of the narratives into a larger view, then you meditate. And so, as long as the chanting helps perform that function, however quickly or however slow it takes, that's useful. And it's good to memorize.
Okay.
And we have so much garbage going through our heads anyhow. Might as well add something good.
Thank you.
This poor side of the room hasn't gotten any.
Hi, John. My question is about mind wandering. Like in when I sit to focus on the breath, I notice in like under a minute, the mind every time gets lost in a thought chain, and then I bring it back. This seems to be a common problem for a lot of meditators. So, what are your suggestions on that?
Well, one thing, remember that as soon as you notice you're following a thought, just drop it. Make that your instant sort of knee-jerk reaction. You don't say, well, let me finish the thought first, then I'll go back. You drop it sort of mid-thought. And then 2, remind yourself the fact that I caught myself, that's a good sign. And then 3, get to the position where you see, whenever a thought like that comes in, there's going to be a change in the energy in the body. And if you can sense that change, there'll be a tensing up someplace. When you can sense that, just breathe through it. And then it's kind of like a marker for the thought, and the marker's gone, then the thought will stop. And finally, get used to the fact that there will be times when their thoughts are going through the mind, but you just can't stop them. Say, well, I'm just not going to pay attention. It's like someone's talking over in that corner of the room, but you've got work to do over here. You can focus on the work. They don't have to shut up. They can keep on talking as much as they want. But you're just not going to go there. Okay, questions?
Okay, Dhanajan. Too many questions, and some of them are not on topic. I'm going to completely avoid anything that is not on topic. What obstructions to stream entry are prevalent in modern for modern lay practitioners? And I think there is a related question on what kind of obstructions there are towards stream entry in the West. This is particularly, I guess, to your point that you found only stream enterers in Asia.
Okay, obstructions. Well, one is not having a person, being around a person, people of integrity, not having the true Dharma to listen to. But the big one is appropriate attention. You really got to focus on what am I doing that's causing stress and what can I do to stop. That's the big one. And as far as specific problems in the West, it's becoming more and more universal. The society just impinges more and more and more on you. You've got a screen in your pocket, you've got a screen in your, wherever you go. And you're just getting more pulled out of yourself. You're being told that the important things in the world right now are things that somebody else is doing someplace else. And you're just an observer. Whereas the Buddha says the important things in life are what you are doing right here, right now. What you can do differently. Remember, they haven't gotten to the point yet where the phone turns itself on, right? You have to turn it on.
So there are two questions that seem to be related. Well, actually, no. Let me put one by one. One is basically, are all 4 factors necessary to be a stream enterer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, you may not meet a person of integrity in person. It is possible to read the Dhamma, and if you have a lot of integrity yourself. But that requires an awful lot of integrity, because it is so easy to miss your own defilements.
Including hearing the true Dhamma? This is just my addition.
Yeah.
Okay. And hearing the true Dhamma from somebody else.
Right.
Okay. There's another question. Is it possible to enter the stream but be unsure that you did?
Well, it's a very impressive experience. I heard someone once say one time that this person had seen the death list, there's no big deal. And in that case, I would say, I don't think so. I mean, you're stepping outside of space and time. Think about that.
Okay, this is a question related to...
By the way, in response to that also, we'll be going across, and as this happened, we'll talk about some experiences that people think are stream entry or maybe stream entry, but they're not.
Exactly on that particular one. This question says, the Buddhist teacher Dipa Ma allegedly brought many lay people into stream entry by just having them do 3 to 20 days of intensive practice. In your experience, is that still practical?
I've never experienced anything like that. We can do it in that short amount of time.
In terms of 5 precepts being plenty, what if one regularly uses meditative music in order to brighten the mind?
Okay, that's not forbidden by the 5 precepts. The monks can't do that, but... And don't just listen to meditative music all through your meditation, okay?
And Tanajan, when you're answering these questions, maybe you want to look at the camera. Sorry, I'm just... Didn't mean to be disrespectful, sorry.
Well, they can see me in profile. What's wrong with my profile?
Okay, this question is about hearing the true Dhamma. And I think the question goes, some teachers say, quote, "You are the consciousness that continues after death. You are awareness." Is this in harmony with the teaching of the Buddha on self/not self?
Ooh, that's a big question. You keep on identifying with moments of consciousness, but the moments of consciousness are impermanent. But as long as you keep on creating a sense of attachment to something, you are creating a being. It's not like there's no being there, but it's something you create. And then you're subject to all the, out there in Sumland, it's subject to all the problems of being a being. You have to feed, you have to fight with other people for food, and then when you die, you just keep on going and going and going. And the Buddha himself said this, it's through craving and clinging that a being latches on to the craving and goes. But the question, do you want to continue making beings, basically? That's what the teaching on not-self is. Let's stop the process.
Okay. This question is also related to finding someone who is practicing the true Dhamma. I do not have any community or practitioner near me, only online, and sometimes I feel desperate for a Dharma teacher. How am I supposed to gain stream entry from chat room?
Dharma online is a pet of snakes. I said Dharma online is a pit of snakes. Some of the stuff I've read on some of these chat rooms are horrible. I'd stay away from them. So make whatever effort you can to find someone you feel really is a person of integrity.
I guess this is a free question for you. This one comes up every time, so I kind of thought I'll just ask this one. Is there no free will given that there is no self?
Okay, the Buddha never said there is no self. He never said there is a self, but he did say there is this process of selfing, where you create a sense of you as a being, as I said, through your attachments. And you do have the choice to continue or to not continue. You have the choice to do things skillfully or unskillfully. But if you didn't have some freedom of choice, there'd be no point in teaching or practicing. Questions on here? Question back. The mic is here.
Is it alright if I? Okay. So I have a question about, you were talking about compassion. I was wondering how you balance, sometimes it can seem like I can do something nice for someone, but it'll sap a lot of energy from me. And is there a line where, where you make that delineation?
That's going to be up to your sense of inspiration, whether you really feel inspired to give or not. Sometimes you get kind of worn out, and you say, okay, enough for right now, I really got to recharge my batteries. But it's also good to stretch yourself every now and then.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have actually two questions. As Buddha Sutta, the stream enterer has 7 more lifetimes.
At most.
At most. And what if this is like one of the lifetimes in between that? Would it be possible for the stream enterer to know that they have?
There's no odometer.
So, okay.
Odometer.
So then,
there's the security. Okay, there's a limit to how many more times I'm going to be born.
Okay, and is it actually important to know that you've had that stream entry attainment? Because if you keep up the practice, that attainment is a side effect of the practice.
Basically you have to find the path again and go through the experience again. And then the question is, when you have the experience, and we'll get to this afternoon about how good your powers of reflection are around the experience, how much you're actually able to let go. But basically we'll try to remember, okay, if it ever hits, just watch it. And if you say, wow, cool, I'm finally a stream enter, okay, you lost it. I mean, you still have stream entry, but it's, that's as far as you're going to go for that particular experience.
Okay.
But you don't need to know whether you've had it or not in the past.
I have a question about psychological integration. A lot of the time when I'm trying to practice, I feel like it's a lot of splitting, it's a lot of cutting off, and it seems like the goal is a kind of unity.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious how you see that progression happening.
Okay, what happens is that in terms of stream entry, everything gets reorganized. And as far as unity, there are states of unity which are just states of concentration. The Buddha wasn't after unity, he was after freedom. And so the question of putting things together, it's like a kaleidoscope. The pieces fit together, they kind of come together in a new pattern after stream entry. And there's a lot more grounding.
I guess I'm asking about I don't know, I'm thinking about it through a psychological lens. If you read Carl Jung or something, you talk a lot about shadow. Mm-hmm. You feel like you're splitting off parts of yourself that maybe need to be expressed in some way.
Well, the question is, if they're unskillful, you have to learn how to talk to them. I mean, you don't just cut. You have to understand where they're coming from. And it's like you've got a whole committee inside. And everybody's looking for happiness, but some of them have some pretty strange ideas about what happiness is. And if you can train them to see, that what you thought was happiness is not happiness, instead of cutting them off, you've converted them. Think of it that way. And then there's some wacko members inside who just go say, I'm sorry.
Jen, I have a follow-up questions. I really appreciate when you describe part of our attachment as fascinations with sensual thoughts, or pleasant. To me, it's like fascination with pleasant thoughts or pleasant something that's going on in my head, and finding it's hard to let that go. Just wanted to ask for advice how to let go of that.
Well, the Buddha says we can learn how to like the pleasures of concentration. That helps to wean you away. That you don't feel like you have to feed off of those things because you got something better to feed on.
Okay.
So you work on the pleasure of concentration and the pleasures of the practice.
So it also takes some time to cultivate that. So it's
right.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, you'd say, well, if I really want pleasant things to happen in my life, I've got to be generous.
Pardon me?
If I want pleasant things to happen in my life, I have to be generous. So let me think about good ways to be generous. So you can kind of channel that kind of thinking into what would be a nice way to be generous.
Okay. Thank you.
You had a question. Where's the mic? But while the mic is traveling, I'll tell you a story. We had a commemoration for John Fuang every year after he died. And one year I was in charge of getting the presents that were going to be given to monks. And in Thailand, they have these sort of standard issue packages for monks. And it's got cheap detergent, cheap medicine, cheap toothpaste. I mean, the cheap versions of everything. And I said, let's do something nice this time. So I went down and with a lay person, we got a nice stainless steel bowl to use with water, and a nice Japanese liquid detergent, and some nice American soap, and all these other things. And it was a little package about this big. And when the people came from Bangkok, they said, okay, where are the presents for the monks? And I showed them, and said, that's too small. I said, but it's good stuff. He said, it's too small. So whatever kind of ways that you want to think of being generous, channel your thoughts of sensuality into that.
This is a little bit off the stream entry, but it's kind of going toward. I mean, I'm a volunteer teacher at the Wat Puthanusaran Temple for close to 15 years for students, and now I'm focusing on the teenager in my class, and I do teaching them about 5 precepts, right? And when you're talking about the integrity, and then it's focus on the 5 precepts, and for the young generation, I mean the teenager and stuff, even the young kid, the lying is one of the hardest things for them. So I don't know how am I going to try to encourage them to understand, sometimes it's just teenage or kids, that's how sometimes they do things, or even they worry about the parent, will worry about them. So they just have to do it. So that is one part that is so hard for me to.
Okay, well, there is a problem with the new generation, which is that they've been brought up that they have to please everybody.
Yes.
And this is something you've got to get across, is that there are times when you don't have to please people.
Mm.
And it's not being harsh, it's not being wrong. I mean, I heard that some people say, well, wrong speech is when you hurt people's feelings. Well, no.
Mm-hmm.
Wrong speech is when you try to get somebody to break the precepts.
Mm.
So trying to get that message across, that you have something of integrity within you that doesn't have to depend on other people liking you all the time.
Okay.
John Fuang's comment one time, we lived in a neighborhood where a lot of the lay people didn't like him.
Mm.
And he knew it. And he said, when you're not liked by other people, it's really easy. When you go away, you don't have to ask permission. When you come back, you don't have to bring presents. There are certain advantages to not being popular.
Yeah. Definitely, yeah. Sometimes you want that part of life to be that. Okay, so and like, but sometimes they like, I guess it's one thing is they with their parents or they try to hide something, right? So they that's why they have to lie. They don't want the parent to be upset. But other days, it's more like I try to tell them like, well, then you have to try to do something good so that you don't have to lie.
Exactly. Don't do anything that you would have to hide.
Yes. Yeah. Slowly, but get to that. Yeah. And then, ขอบคุณค่ะ
There's a question here. But people on Zoom land will need a mic. Can someone take the mic?
Anybody?
Okay.
I have a question about my meditation practice. I basically follow what you teach, where I go through the body and then try to be aware of the whole body. What happens is after about half an hour, I'm aware of my whole body, but at some point after that, I struggle to figure out whether I'm actually aware of my body or am I thinking about being aware of my whole body. I don't know whether it makes any sense.
It makes sense, and the question is, does it matter? As long as you feel your body, you're aware. I mean, there may be the perceptions layered on top of that, but as long as you have some sense of where your feet are, where your hands are, you're with your body.
Okay, and so keep going.
Right.
Hi. Am I in the wrong view to just focus on the 5 precepts and 4 noble truths instead of studying the Sutta and knowing all those 84,000 Pratamakhand? Am I in the wrong view? Because I never thought of going to Nibbana. I just focus on the 4 that is not pure and 5 precepts that is not pure.
Okay, keeping the Four Noble Truths as the context. The question is, what am I doing to cause suffering? And how can I stop? And if you focus on that question, you're doing fine. Now it's good to know, have a little bit wider knowledge than just the 5 precepts and the Four Noble Truths, but you don't have to know the whole canon. The Buddha said there's a list called The Wings to Awakening. We have a book out there which is called The Wings to Awakening, which he gives the lists of dhammas that are important to know. And that's plenty right there.
Another question. I practice here, like remotely mostly, but I'm just wondering about the different techniques of meditation, like the whole body breath awareness technique versus like maybe just bare attention or mindfulness that might be taught kind of like in the insight meditation world. I'm wondering if both have equal value, or do you have a...
Well, bare attention is basically telling you just learn how to be with whatever comes up, right?
Right, as I understand it, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And
I mean, my practice is to anchor in the breath and then just allow, when things come up, just to be with that and to observe.
Well, part of it is observing. The Buddha says there are 2 types of causes of suffering. Those that you get dispassion for them just by watching them with equanimity, and they go away on their own. And the other is what basically you stare at them and they stare right back. And those require that you do something more active and proactive. And this is where it comes to working with the breath, working with how you talk to yourself, and actively trying to get rid of unskillful qualities and develop skillful qualities. And the perceptions you're holding in mind. This requires that you be more proactive. So you're going to need to do a proactive practice in order to take care of that kind of cause of suffering.
So do you just have to make a judgment call, like discernment, like being more receptive? I can be more receptive in this awareness, this practice. Like maybe I do more of a receptive kind of approach, and then if that's like I'm getting too pulled away, with thinking or something of that sort, then get more active.
Yeah, it's going to be. I mean, this is a large part of what it means to be on the middle path, is to figure out what's required right now. And having a range of tools that you're going to use and figure out what's useful. I would prefer that you work with the breath first and get more proactive to begin with. And then there are times when you're dealing with something that you don't understand. Step back and just watch. See what's going to come up.
Yeah, so that kind of like sequencing, almost like laying the foundation to get concentrated, and then once in that concentrated state, then you have the capacity to just witness more easily. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so
We just got one more online question, then we'll talk about
meal. Okay.
meal.
So, Thanajan, there have been so many questions, but I'm going to try and summarize a couple of questions. There are several questions online that are asking about different kinds of experiences that they have seen. People sometimes
we'll talk about
laughing
that.
and all
We'll
that.
talk about that this afternoon.
Okay. Okay. In that case, we'll leave that out. And then there is one question that you have, I think, answered in your talk. The question is, regardless of previous karma, as long as as long as one eliminates the 3 fetters, one can still be a stream enterer?
You become a stream enterer first, the 3 other fetters get cut later.
And then there is one question on this particular theme keeps coming up. 2 ways in which it has been asked. How persistent does one need to be? And the other question is similar.
Very.
Yeah. And the other question is, why do you translate virya as persistence and not as energy?
Okay, because we're looking at the kind of energy or the kind of application that's required, and it's got to be persistent and consistent, and you don't just have a burst of effort and then you have to keep kind of like running a marathon. You have to learn how to pace yourself, but keep it going all the time.
So we're going to break for the meal. What time we're going to be back so we can tell the people online?
1 o'clock.